Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Intuitive Living with Suzanne. Thank you once again for joining me out here. This week, we are in the second of the four-part series for the core archetypes, the victim. So what exactly are archetypes and why are they important? I talked about this briefly in the last episode, the last archetype episode. Archetypes are universal symbolic patterns that are used to explain the nature of the world. The archetypal characters allow us to see patterns and predictability in our own lives so that we might understand ourselves and the world around us. This is Suzanne Arjona, and you're listening to Intuitive Living with Suzanne, where we are tuning in to our inner voices and taking life to the next level. So I've talked about how archetypes show up as characters in our personality, like the hero, the explorer, or the wise sage. And they can also show up as stories, like the hero's journey, the rags to riches story, or overcoming the monsters. You'll see these story archetypes repeated over and over again in books and movies. So while there are many character archetypes, there are four common archetypes that frequently show up for most people: the saboteur, the victim, the child, and the prostitute. So none of these are good or bad. They're all neutral, and each can help us reflect on our self-image and how we might show up in the world. Each archetype has both a shadow and a light side, and I'll be addressing each of the four in separate podcast episodes. Today, we're going to talk about the victim archetype. Now, the victim shadow side shows up as self-doubt. It shows up as overwhelm and things like fear of failure. However, unlike the saboteur, which we talked about before, when the victim shows up, we're blaming outside influences on our predicament. In reality, the victim is there to show us our own empowerment. So remember, the archetypes are neither good nor bad. They're just neutral. They give us neutral information that we can apply to our lives. So when we feel powerless, and especially if we feel powerless because someone else holds the power, this is the victim mentality showing up. We start to blame. Okay, remember, different than the saboteur, where we allowed an aspect of ourselves to hold us back. With the victim, we blame someone or something else for our powerlessness. Okay, the victim tells us that it's never our fault. So the light side of the victim is the reminder. Okay, it's the reminder that we have all the power within ourselves. Okay, it reminds us of the boundaries that we can set to keep from being victimized, as well as recognizing others' boundaries so that we don't victimize them. It works both ways. It's not just, if the victim archetype shows up for you, it's not necessarily you in the victim role. It could be you on the other side of it and potentially victimizing someone else. So again, this is where the light side will show up and help you discern that. It's also a reminder for us to take responsibility for our own choices. Okay, if we let our power go, that's on us, not someone else. Okay, so the victim has been a recurring theme in my life, both as feeling victimized and blaming others for my predicaments, and as a true victim and being reminded to take back my power, especially in relationships. That's been a real tough one for me. And that's been the hardest lesson for me. And it's not an easy one, especially, if you're in relationship with the other person. So the victim mentality focuses on what's being taken from you. To flip this, you need to focus on what you have. Focus on gratitude for your freedom of choice, your power to change. Okay, gratitude for your ability to empathize with and not victimize others. Okay, now I get it. Flipping a mindset, especially one that's ingrained in us as the four core archetypes, is a lot easier said than done. But the first step is just recognizing it, okay? And then practicing each time we recognize its appearance. Because only then will we be able to see its shadow and accept its light and apply that to our everyday life. So, if you'd like to further explore how to use the lessons of the archetypes to move through life's roadblocks or tap into how your inner victim is blocking your progress, schedule a free call with me today. There's a link in the podcast notes as well as on my website, www.thelifewalk.com. In the meantime, feel free to share this podcast with friends and colleagues. I do appreciate all of you who have helped me share these messages already about taking your life to the next level. I appreciate each and every one of you who has already shared this podcast and our community over on Substack. So thank you again for tuning in. And until next episode, I wish you the brightest blessings.